Hey, This Life in Tech, episode 177. I'm Jason.
We're live with episode
177. Can you hear me?
And I'm TK. And Jason's locked up right now on the screen.
Oh, no. On my side, we're good. Uh-oh. Are we not off to a good start?
Jason, you're locked up right now?
On my side, I'm okay. Uh-oh. What are we going to do? I'm fine on my side. I can see you fine.
There we go. Now everything's working correctly.
Oh, okay. Maybe we were just buffering somewhere.
I don't know. What episode is this? I missed that on the front end. Is this 178? 179?
This is 177.
Okay.
We'll just cut. Hey, welcome to This Life in Tech, episode 177. Trying to cut it live. I'm Jason.
I'm TK.
And we're Danless.
I know we haven't been Danless in a long time.
Yeah, man. Like, I almost want him to enroll in law school.
Just so I told you that's the next step, right? So I told you it's the credential thing. It's the letters after his name.
Yeah, well, at this point, you might as well keep going because you got about half the alphabet already.
I never wanted to hack into anybody's LinkedIn account like I've wanted to hack into Dan's and start putting all of his certificates at the back end.
Yeah.
There'd be no room for anything else. I mean, and I'm not saying that to make fun of him. I mean, he is well credentialed.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. I guess he had something else to do, man. I was talking to him yesterday about side stuff. We were just chit-chatting and through text messages. And then randomly, like 2 hours later, he texted me back and said, hey, by the way, I'm not going to make it tomorrow morning. And I don't know how you are, man. I operate from a position of if somebody wants to tell me something, they'll tell me. When it comes to like personal business, I don't really ask and maybe it's a bad thing, but I always feel like I'm prying and I don't like that. You know what I mean?
Well, especially in something like that. I agree. Like, I think guys in general are more that way. If you tell me hey, I can't do this, I'm like, okay. And
sure, man.
Over the years with friends getting divorced and stuff like that, hey, I'm getting divorced. I'm like, all right, man, you need anything from me? Nope. And then people start asking questions. I'm like, I don't know. Why didn't you ask? Well, because I didn't think it was my business. If he wanted to share, he probably would have shared.
Exactly.
Kind of a personal.
And I think part of that too, man, is because I do think about this, and like my wife and I talk about it. I think part of it too is like I already have enough stuff to think about that is my business, right. And so like I'm just busy, and I like that, and I'm not complaining about it. But I don't need somebody else's business to be my business because I don't have my own business. I have my own business.
Right. I got shit going on.
Yeah. Like, okay, you don't want to show up. Hey, man, it's not like I don't like you anymore.
Right.
I didn't take it personally. You'll be back at some point.
I mean, everybody's got at some point. You can't do everything all the time, and some days, especially because he's running a business and he's traveling back and forth and stuff like that. So
it's completely understandable. Yeah, we've actually had a hell of a good run of not missing any episodes. Everybody being here, it was impressive.
I know. Yeah, I think the last one I missed one because I was going back. I was on the road coming back from South Carolina one time when I was down at the Citadel.
Yeah, but that was before the lockdown. That was before the pandemic. That was quite some time ago.
That's what I'm saying. That was I think it was like last October, November, somewhere in that time frame.
Mm-hmm. Somewhere around there.
I thought that episode was funny because you guys were talking something about NASCAR. I was like, and I was driving through South and North Carolina. I was going past Darlington and some of the other tracks that you have to get through. I'm like, I don't know what they're talking about, but I know where they're talking about now.
Yeah, totally. Oh man, so we ended last week with talking about mandated legislated backdoors in software, particularly around encryption. And there's two bills. I don't necessarily know how to differentiate them. I have the acronyms. I've actually taken some notes, believe it or not. The one bill that I wanted to talk about is the forcing providers to put the backdoors into at-rest and in-transit encryption. That's LAED, L-A-E-D. It's like 56 pages. I read a good 40 pages of it, and then I read some blog synopses of it.
Right.
And so what I wanted to talk about, because, one of the people I always know I can talk to about crypto and communications is you, because you have a substantial background in it, is it, at least in my lifetime, and so I started getting involved in politics from an age when Clinton got elected after first Bush, right? So that's around my history. And I remember talks about stuff like this even back then, not in the same way, but we need backdoors, encryption, so forth and so on. And I always wondered why, like, what's the motivation? What are people actually trying to get at by saying this is how we solve this problem? Because in this one case, like the EARN-IT bill, which is the newest one, it's purportedly about child trafficking and child pornography on the internet.
Right.
But like that's already illegal. You know what I mean? And so is this a case of we're going to pile on for some reason? What are you really trying to get at? That's what I guess I don't really understand at all. I don't know what you think.
Well, if you go back to the Clinton era, when you start talking about encryption, really when you start talking about the concept of how are we going to deal from a law enforcement perspective with the fact that things are encrypted, that goes back to the Clipper chip.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Exactly.
That thing was rendered inert before it even became law. People like broke that thing like muy pronto, right?
Oh yeah.
And so that was going to be the de facto way to keep honest people honest, right? And that's just like anything else in life. You're going to have that level of people that want to be malfeasant are going to be malfeasant, right? And any other rule you make is not going to change rule one, right? I look at it like when I was a kid, and if you and I are out in the yard talking, and we're not screaming, we're keeping our thoughts to ourselves amongst two people. If your dad or my dad wanted to know what was going on, they physically had to come up to one of us and say, "What were you guys talking about?"
Right.
At that point, we're consenting to let a third party know. When we start talking about, and let's not even talk about the mechanics of it from a software development perspective. Let's talk about the mechanics of it. Let's talk about the efficacy of it.
Yeah.
What you're doing is then you're saying, I'm removing consent for who knows about my data. Right? When you look prior to the internet, prior to mass computers and everything like that, what did the FBI do? What did law enforcement do? They had to build a case. It was work, right? Because we in the American society work from the presumption of innocence, right? You have to prove I'm doing something wrong. Now I don't have to prove that I'm not. And there's a lot of ways that law enforcement attempts to get around that. But most of it is through citizen ignorance about what the law actually is, and the police are like, hey, you have to do this. Well, I'm probably not. Right? What I have to do is call an attorney if I don't understand. Right? I have to, and we don't start from an appraisal of rights anymore. And along with those rights come a lot of responsibility, and much in the same vein of things going on in Minneapolis and everything like that. When we put individuals in positions of public trust, law enforcement, politicians, and things like that, the penalties for malfeasance need to be extreme. Right? Because we're saying, hey, your level of trust needs to be up here. And when it's not, when you violate that trust, you're done in a way that is legally more violent. If you take that, legally more actionable than not. I think the big thing, there's two or three things that are really at play when it comes to talking about putting backdoors into building them into software. The old argument, if you build it for the good guys, the bad guys are going to get it. And if people don't understand that, I can't help you.
Right.
Maybe we can't even be friends. Right. I mean, I can be empathetic to the ignorance that you don't want to get around, because what you're trying to say is, hey, we believe in the public domain of law enforcement, everything so much that we're willing to say they're going to do it right and the bad guys won't be able to get in. It basically disconnects with me, right? You unprove that from reality. That's number one. Number two is year over year, and I can't remember the exact year, but there's Congressman Yoder. I think he's from the Kansas 3rd. Very engaging young man. I've heard him speak at Sign It and everything. Had a brief conversation with him at an event. It was a law about internet privacy, and it passed unanimously in the House, and this was like either in 15 or 16, or around that time frame, passed unanimously in the House, went to the Senate and promptly died. Next year it came back, it passed on a voice vote in the House again, went to the Senate and promptly died. When asked why that is every year that happens, his sole response is probably approaching half of the Senate has never sent or received an email on their own.
Yeah.
Right. And I like to think it's on multiple planes. He defines it as one thing, and it's the age of that user. Right.
Okay.
That they're
sure.
60s, 70s and above. And so it's not a tool that they grew up with. Right. I think to a certain extent, much more greatly, is the simple fact that if you personally respond to that email, now it's part of the public record because it's a .gov thing. Now it's part of the public record, and now you're held accountable for your actions.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right? So somebody printed that off and gave it to me. I never responded. Right? And if your policy is I'm not going to respond, then that's a different thing. Right?
Right.
One of the big things in communications in general, when it comes to the government, big business, and what we legislate, is we legislate the ability to audit. Right? And if you're going to legislate the ability to audit, then what you're tacitly doing is I'm legislating the ability to archive data.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or I'm legislating the mandate to archive data. Right? And so how we do that is extremely important. We've talked about things like this in the past, that it has to be immutable, right? In order to hold people accountable, right? And I want to hold the people in the public trust extremely accountable. Like I want to know why in Minneapolis that one jackass cop had so many complaints against him. It wasn't casual evidence that this dude might be an arch villain, right?
Right.
Like let's get on it, right? And the three henchmen standing around just watching, you're morally culpable for what you're doing. Because when you see evil, I don't care what color outfit it has on, you have to respond to evil. Right. Mm-hmm. So, put an orange jumpsuit on, don't pass go directly to jail. Mm-hmm. Right. You'll get your day in court. But because of your status as law enforcement, you're a flight risk. So we're gonna hold you accountable. Right.
Sure.
And if you do that, then you gain some of the public trust back, and you have the ability to say, this was a justified shoot. This is a bad guy. Right. And now we stop having these wild swings in behavior, and we have a more credible force, and we have a force that applies the law equally across all demographics. Right.
Right.
If you look at that and you apply that same thing to technology, right? Because politicians are going to have to be the ones to make this happen, right? And I think the only people that have less trust right now than the police are politicians, right?
Well said. Probably, I would agree. Yeah, for sure.
And my plan is and always will be that every politician, before they walk onto the floor of the House or the Senate, has to put a fire suit on like a NASCAR team with the logos of everybody that's given them money. And the bigger the logo, the larger amount of money taken from that thing. So a guy like Cory Booker can't walk on and vote for Big Pharma every time because that's the largest contributor to what he does. And we could go down the list, right? Now, I understand how we got here, right? Because of the expense it takes to get elected to public office, right? And for those of you out there that really want to wonder how I think, why am I going to spend 10, 20, 30, $50 million of my own money to get elected to a $180,000 job? Think about that.
Right. Yeah,
right? If you work from that prism, a lot of this other stuff I think comes into focus.
Well, take a few minutes to study poker and how to bet based on pot odds. That's the answer.
Yeah, and it's like most people are never going to do that. They're not going to go learn a big new skill. And so, as you guys know from me speaking and stuff, I put it out in terms where people can get their head around things, right? And when you have people that are largely ill-informed, aka the United States Senate, about technology, there's very few. Like John Warner, not John Warner, he's retired. Mark Warner from Virginia, he made all of his wealth betting on cellular technology. right? He was a tower broker, that kind of infrastructure guy before cell phones were cool, right? And so he's very savvy. And there's a lot of other entrepreneurs, but most of those people live in the house just because the house is significantly younger than the Senate, right? And so in order to do that, you're going to rely on staffers to inform, right? Or you're going to rely on expert testimony under oath. But who do they have in there, right? They get the Googles in there. They don't get how many really art type encryption experts. Has John Callis ever been called to get up and stop and talk about it?
Not that I know of.
I mean, I've seen that guy speak on encryption and everything like that. Number one, he can put it in plain terms. But number two, you're not going to question his credentials about the ability to encrypt something because they're impeccable, right? And they should be, right? Because he's done, for all of you folks that have iPhones and Macs out there, the reason that they're secure is because this guy's breathing fresh air on the planet and he cares, right? And I think that's really important, right? But if we just look at the ability within the government space to create fidelity in information so that we can hold public officials accountable, because I think, I don't care what spectrum you're on and politically, accountability is huge. Yeah. People, usually I can take losing if I know that the system's not fixed.
That's right. Sure.
Right? Just like in voting. Like right now, what is people's belief in the integrity of the system? It's less than it's ever been, right? And if we say we want greater participation, we want greater fidelity, or like that, that's incumbent on the government to make it easy to vote, right? The easiest thing we should do as adults is vote, right? It shouldn't be hard. Our voices should be heard, right? And whether you limit the number of voting booths, you start limiting the polling places so that the lines get longer and people get frustrated, right? You start chipping away at that. But that system has to be immutable.
Right.
So how do we make that immutable? Do we really want that? Right? And if you look back to the pre-computer age, how do we guarantee that third party that wants to have access to that information, that wants to know what you were doing, has your consent? Right? And in times where consent is not required for legal cases, for example, building a legal case, what are the mechanisms to get people there? And it can't be, we're just going to put a backdoor in this thing and hope you're the only person that has the key. Right? Because banks are broken into all the time, right? John Dillinger, when they asked him, why do you rob banks? He's like, well, that's where the money is.
That's right. Well, and maybe it's tinted glasses for me, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, but it seems to me that you've kind of hit something spot on with the idea of trust. It seems to me that pre-internet age, pre-information age, not only was there more trust between the public and, let's say, enforcement and legislative officials, but there's trust in a system. And then there was a way the system had to work because that's what we all agreed upon. And that seems to be gone to a point where, and so that, I kind of go back to this idea, and I'm thinking about it as you're talking, making points. Like why is a backdoor into, let's say, in-transit encryption the right answer to address that problem? Like it doesn't, to me, it doesn't address the problem. It creates even more problems than it addresses. Right. And if you read, and what's interesting is if you go through even some of the good legal synopses of the bill, you can tell the staffers wrote it. You know what I mean? Because there's actually there's some interesting positioning in there. Like, okay, this only affects you if you're a provider that has over 1 million monthly active users. Okay. If you're not, there's a fail-safe. Well, the Attorney General can order you to comply if you don't fall into that criteria where it's mandatory. Well, okay, so there's a framework there that I understand why that works that way, but it doesn't address why you think this is the answer to the problem to begin with. Right.
I mean, even if, anonymity is one thing, right? There's really what's at play are two things, privacy and security. Okay. The consumer world, you care about privacy and security. And this is where people, when they have consumer software or prosumer software and they want to make an enterprise play, where they largely miss the center of the bullseye in trying to sell or break into an enterprise market. enterprises don't care about employees' privacy. They care about the security and the fidelity of their data. Right. And so data in transit being secure is probably the best example of this. It's all right to know that Bob is sending stuff to Alice, right? It's not all right to know what they're sending in the clear, right? Because unless I stand up and scream at the top of my lungs in the middle of a stadium what's going on in my life, every 80,000 people don't need to know. More importantly, the whole world doesn't need to know if you put those legislated backdoor. To me it's not the right term. I don't know what the right term is, because at that point it's not the back door, it's not the front door, right? You basically say,
everything.
I'm just basically I've got a filter that I'm going to filter all this data through.
Right. Exactly.
I'm not going to keep it. I just want to know what it all is, right? And so, is this a privacy play or is it a security play or is it both? If you're going to say, if you're going to require something that I think is less than important and it's kind of silly, is say, hey, you can't obfuscate who the endpoints are.
Right. Okay.
I got to know it's Bob. I got to know it's Alice, and I can't obfuscate that endpoint. Well, then do we say that the next thing is, well, because so now is the VPN industry toast? Right. And things like that. Right. And so there's not because we elect congressmen in 2 years and senators in 6, and effectively a third of the Senate trades out every 2 years. Everything has a timer on it, right? Of what we got to do and how, because people want to get reelected, right? And like people want to work in a vacuum. No, this is right. This is pure. Well, that's not how America works. There's 350 plus million people over 6 time zones. Right. And multiple people can say anachronism, but just the way the country works, some things are mandated by the states, some things are mandated by the federal government. People will tell you they got federal overreach with unfunded mandates and all these other things. Right. But the simple fact is it's not easy. Like our system by design of a representative republic is not an easy way to do government. It's why when fledgling democracies around the world, Eastern Europe's a great example of all these countries that were under the thumb of communism for 50 plus years. When they got, I think not one of them adopted our system of government. No one does. Right? It's the grand experiment. It's the hardest way to govern yourselves. It's even harder when we put up roadblocks to people getting elected. Right? What a better way to use encryption and especially with data in transit than the voting system. Yeah. If we want to say it's immutable, how hard is it to make someone immutable in that system? Not hard at all. We do it all the time for work purposes and for other things. Why is it a bridge too far? Or do we not want immutability? Right.
Well, see, and I was just going to say real quick, and it seems to me like this is where the policing part ties in too, is that the very nature of policing has changed where, again, I could be wrong, but this is my view of what it was like before I became active in this, before I was old enough to really understand what was going on, is if you were suspected of something, a case was built, and then you were approached, more or less, right?
Right.
And now it's the exact opposite, where because data has some level of persistence, data is collected, and then crime is searched for within it. Right. It's backwards. Well, I shouldn't say it's backwards. The process has reversed. Rather than there being crime and then investigated, there's investigation and then they find crime. Well, shit, man. I don't know if you've ever laid in the grass and looked at the clouds, but I do it with my 5-year-old all the time, and we see all kinds of dragons and shit. Dude, there ain't dragons. There ain't dragons.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a cumulus cloud. We're not getting rain today. That's all you saw. But that's it. That's all we saw. It's not happening, right?
Right. But that's how this strikes me is let's create a bypass or a sluice of data where we can just look at it whenever we feel like, and we'll find the crime. Trust us. Right.
And I think that's the mechanical piece of this one way or another is easy. Yeah. Right. Mm-hmm. It's 5-10 lines of code either way, right? Plus or minus, right? You either want it in or you don't want it in. So what are we talking about? We're ultimately talking about the human condition. Yes, right? People want to make this big referendum on technology. Well, again, you have people in their elderly, effectively, that are in the U.S. Senate that they have to make it about the technology because nobody wants to get into the people piece. Right?
Yeah, that's where it gets messy.
Right, because now you're telling the citizens, we don't trust you enough. We're going to start to monitor your we won't do that. Well, no, you've in the past you've proven that you're not a good steward of the public domain sometimes, right? And that you act in your interests, in the interests of the people that give you money, not the interests of the people that are in your district.
Right.
Right. And so how much lately we've gotten a little bit better, even just like around COVID, how many senators of both parties or politicians dumped stock ahead of the public announcement of COVID and some of the things surrounding it? Quite a few.
Yeah. Yeah. It was not a small number.
Right. Well,
it was not a small number.
Does anybody think this is the first week that happened?
Right. Exactly.
Right? So this lack of transparency in data has really benefited certain groups over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so now we're going to say we don't want to. Well, so is that level of fidelity going to be applied to that group of people too? Are we going to, when they're in a meeting and they hear, hey, we're going to announce this, is that going to be somewhere that data is going to be chugged into the public domain and it can be seen who looked at it?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Exactly.
Here's the thing. I mean, in the way that we have the ability to catalog data, right, for lack of a better term, and do it securely.
Mm-hmm.
I was speaking to a group of people in the government, and we were talking about what's the biggest threat to the fidelity of data, and I'm talking in the government space, is graduated security clearances.
Yeah, sure.
You got secret levels, different caveats in there, top secret, and then you've got top secret and beyond, right? And so what's been going on for the computer age is that there's one computer and one data storage set for secret, one for top secret, and then all these other caveats, right? Well, that was great 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Mm-hmm. Today, the only people that benefit from this are the vendors, because they're selling 3 computer systems per individual, per cleared individual. Right?
Yeah.
And then because we do everything but the last mile really right, because we're good at that. We can do the 85, 90% solution. We don't put up 3 monitors in their thing and label them differently. We put 1 monitor in a KVM box. Mm-hmm. And then we hope that every time somebody's on the machine, they're going to make the right choice, right? And so we put a cognitive burden in somebody's way, and then we blame them when they mess it up.
Right. Well, and that's completely ignorant of history, because what is always the most fallible piece? Well,
us, look at me. I'm the one that commanded. What has 2 thumbs up? What has 2 thumbs and going to make a mistake? This guy, right? But so now, and I said this to a guy. He used to be the head of communications for the Navy, retired admiral. And he goes, "So, all right, smart guy, what's your solution?" I go, "Okay, with our ability to create an immutable ledger, right? TK's opinion, the only thing blockchain is really good for right now is to create a private immutable ledger of a transaction, just to say it happened or it didn't happen." Yep. Right? Blockchain's been a solution looking for a problem for a long time, and this is what it's here for.
Yeah.
I now take one big honking pipe, biggest throughput I can get. Right? Let's say I've got a TS clearance with certain caveats. You've got a TS clearance with different caveats. We work in 2 different programs. So the big thing about encryption and about data fidelity is the need to know. Mm-hmm. Right? Back in the 70s and 80s, there was a guy, John Walker. He was a young intel officer in the Navy. He got co-opted by the Soviets, and most everything that we had in the arsenal went that way. Right? One of the big takeouts was, he had the TS clearance because he had the highest clearance known to man. He was allowed to look at all the data because they didn't think about need to know. Now, need to know across the board everywhere is a big deal, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So now I got this big honking pipe. And with modern certificates and modern encryption, I can put a certificate on that data. Like whenever I get finished the data, I fill in a classification sheet. It's just another GUI that comes up and asks me to fill out some things. And at the end of it, it's an automated process to type that with a certificate.
That's right.
Okay. Once I've typed it with a certificate, I've got my own, something I have, something I know, whether it's a CAC card, different credentials. But now the system has the ability to understand what I have access to. So if I go and I'm looking throughout this big melee of data, right? Because my opinion is this: we either don't mind if a potential adversary sees the information, or we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
It doesn't
binary.
Right, because for years there was a thing called there's secret clearance, and then a secret for data, and then there was this thing called tactical secret. And because I'm inquisitive and I think people are largely full of crap when they start putting modifiers on stuff like that. I'm like, what does that mean? And like, what do you mean? I go, what is a tactical secret? Right? Where's the definition? Where's the pamphlet, book, block of instruction? I can figure this out. And it took me years. This was on active duty and then retired and teaching stuff. And guys would ask it all the time. I said, I've been asking forever. I'm on a quest. Like I got, I'm like Kate roaming the earth looking for this one little bit of information. And I'm stepping on the rice paper. I'm crunching it up. I'm not ready to know. And finally, I had somebody tell me, they go, it's a secret that has 30 days of operational relevance.
Okay.
Or less. I'm like, okay, I get that.
Sure.
Right? GPS coordinates, where somebody's at, things that are really fluid and subject to change. So if we apply that model to this big pile of data, we have everything from things that are really important to not so important. But the thing about the things that are not so important, they're breadcrumbs. They're leading you to the things that are important, right? And it's the reason why we've taken so long in the government space to get mobile communications on cell phone that's secure, right? And it's coming, right? We're making better and better things, because even things that aren't encrypted, we call them SBUs, secret but unclassified, right? We don't want people to just know that. Put everything in the big pile. It's in the big pipe. And if I have access, if I have the need to know, and I go and search for that data and I click on it, it will open up. At the same time, it'll make an immutable entry that I opened it up. For how long, for how much? Did I copy a page? Did I copy and paste? Did I modify the document? I closed the document, boom. We now know that TK touched the document.
Right.
Well, but more importantly than legitimate access to documents, if I double click on the document and it won't open because I don't have the need to know, even if I have the clearance, that puts an immutable entry.
Exactly.
Right.
Yep.
Now, everybody's double clicked on the wrong thing before. Right. But are you a recidivist? Am I just clicking around trying to find data? That's important data. That is a nugget for law enforcement. Right? You don't have to know what I'm looking at by the title, whatever you could probably tell. You just have to know that I'm outside the bounds of normal activity, and go ask somebody why they're doing that, because that's an anomaly. Like, why are you just clicking on random data you don't have access to?
Well, right. And so that's
right.
That's why when you start
the problem.
Right. And so I think you would agree. To me, when I think about, like, for instance, what this bill is supposed to be addressing, probably the worst kind of crime you could ever imagine, messing with kids, right?
Right.
Crime to me isn't a discrete thing, right? Like, okay, I get a speeding ticket. That looks like it's a discrete thing. I was caught breaking the law in that moment at that time, but it's actually a pattern of behavior leading up to that moment, right? And when you start attaching two things to all this stuff vis-a-vis these immutable records, which is to me for now, right? If you treat it like a Mad Lib, this is true to me for now, right? And you just record that, you start to establish metadata, which I think is something we're phenomenally bad at. For all the technology we have, we're fucking horrible at leveraging labels and tags and using that to our advantage, right? Right. For like specifically searching. And so you sort of tag all this stuff that way, and now you have this pattern of behavior where you've maintained that zero-sum knowledge, where I don't have to tell you what the secret is to demonstrate that I know the secret.
Right.
You have this pattern of behavior that shows an intent, as it were, based on predictive statistics, which is really easy to compute, that there's something untoward going on, perhaps. And maybe that warrants investigation, which is, to me, the function of law enforcement, is to investigate potential crime.
Well, even if you look, when you get to a point where, like, violence, like propensity for extreme violence, whether it's, you got into mass shooters and stuff like that, but even people that are just generally abusive to other humans physically, when they were kids, there were clues, right?
No,
They mistreat their pets. They mistreat other people. They're very it's always that, after a guy goes in and shoots up the place, like, man, he was really quiet. Yeah, because he was plotting killing 20-some plus people, right? I mean, he had some stuff going on in his head. He didn't have time to do this, and we joke about it, but the breadcrumbs are always there.
Mm-hmm.
In anything, when you start talking about the human condition, very rarely is somebody an arch villain. That they're such a that they can have such a great segregation mechanism in their body that you can never tell. And those people are really dangerous ones, right?
Yeah.
Those are the megalomaniacs that come off like, hey, that guy's really charming. There was a great movie years ago called Broadcast News, and it was about, obviously, the news industry. And one of the main characters was great on television, looked the part, everything, every hair, but behind the scenes, he was not intellectually gifted. And the other two folks that were thinking, one of the great lines in that movie when one of the male characters calls to the other male character, to the other protagonist in the movie, she's like, he's the devil. And she's like, oh, that's way overstating it. He's like, well, do you think the devil's going to show up with cloven hooves and a tail and
and a sign?
Right. He's going to look like that guy and sell people on what goes on. Right. Mm-hmm. And those are true in the evil sense. Right. That guy just could read well and he looked well. He had great teeth and great hair and he could read. Right. And he could lean in at the right time, and he knew how to put his clothes on, right? But when you start taking that to a bigger sense, and what level of ego and narcissism, define it, right? Does it take to become the leader of a sovereign nation?
Right.
We always say the U.S. because we live here, but in totality, right? Think about that, right? There are and there have been times where great men have said, I want to step up and I think I can help, right? But for the most part, there's not an unselfish act to say, I want to be the president of the United States, or I want to be the leader of Canada, France, go pick one of the 190 plus countries that elect leaders, right? And in doing so, what level of self-serving behavior goes along in that 4 years?
Right.
And that starts when you start, then, it melts itself down to senators and Congress, to a certain level of, again, it's a $184,000 a year job. And you're going to spend how much to occupy that office for 2 years, and then you're going to do it all again. Right.
Yeah.
And, for all of those out there in YouTube land, my view of politicians is this: Republicans and Democrats are the same people. They're just standing back to back as obverse sides of the same coin, shouting at their base. Right.
Well, I mean, there is one coffer that's being passed around the circle. Like,
it's not like, there's not, and there's, people are outcome driven, right? And the quicker you can get to someone's outcome and what is important to them, the better. But just widespread access, even if let's make the assumption that people that are malfeasant can't get in the back door. Let's just, it's crazy talk, and it's not the technical reality, but let's, for point of the argument, just say that. Is there enough trust in the public space to say that data won't be gerrymandered or used? I mean, how many times, let's use wiretaps as an example. So in the past, you'd wiretap somebody's phone. How many times have there been illegal wiretaps, and then you'd get the information, like you said, you get the information, and now you have some base. Well, now we've got to build the case around that potential crime without using that bit of information, because that won't be allowed, and it'll wreck the case.
Right.
Well, how do you get from A to B like that?
Yeah.
Right. There's no mathematical line that helps get you there straight without a break, without a break in the truth chain.
Right.
And that's really what we're talking about. Right. Is if the truth is important and fidelity of information is important, because that's ultimately what fidelity of information is. It's like, hey, good or bad, here's what it was. Right. And, when you listen to folks that work the Eastern European desks and the Intel community, when the wall came down, like, man, we had no idea how bad it was. Well, what the hell were you doing for the last 50 years?
Yeah, right.
right?
What kind of spy are you, bro?
Right. It's like Spies Like Us, right?
Holy shit, that's a good movie. That's a good movie.
It's that type, right? But that's how much data are we getting on? And so when you hear things like that, and trust me, there are people that it's not like people aren't intelligent, they're not diligent, right? But it's just it's a volume of information.
Right.
Right.
Well, I was going to say too, I think what sometimes people forget, and this is just basic human nature. Let's not forget that, to me, what the danger is when you give unfettered access to structured or unstructured data so that people can go find the problem.
Right.
And you base their job on it.
Right.
They're gonna continue to get paid and feed their family based on their ability to find something. Dude, they're gonna find something.
Yeah.
They're going to. It's going to happen. And that's why, to me, the system itself is what's actually important. You can turn around and this is like what I ask myself. Okay, so if what this bill is trying to address, child trafficking and shit like that, right, is a problem. It is. And it's important to solve it. Agreed. Is this the best way to go about it? Is this the best thing we could possibly come up with? Right. I don't think so.
I don't either.
I think there's a lot of smart people that could get together in a room and come up with far better solutions than giving untrusted, unfettered access to seas of data. Like, I don't understand even what you're trying to achieve with doing that, other than facilitating fishing expeditions is what the term would be.
Well, and you look at it, like nationally, like you get sports coaches and things like that, especially when it comes to mistreatment of kids. How many universities have come out and said, we didn't know this was going on, right?
Right.
So I would ask anybody that's listening to this and just in general, how many times have you been around somebody that's a creep and not known they're a creep?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have to know specifically what it is. Right. But I'm like, I wouldn't let that person give me a ride home from somewhere, let alone a teenage girl.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I mean, because that's really what we're, that's the target demo. Right.
Yep.
And, there's way too many people that walk around this planet with no fear they're going to get punched in the mouth.
Yep.
Right. And you can agree with me or disagree with me on that. But the fact that I've got rights and everybody wants to, run around with their rights, but they don't want to exercise a responsibility. Right. And you see, it depends on which state, right? Obviously, but there's more than one time where, hey, dude does something to some dude's daughter, doesn't kill her, but rapes her, whatever, and dad goes and handles it. Right? I'm not a vigilante by any stretch of the imagination, but why is he handling it? Because we have no trust in the system to adjudicate those things correctly. Right. I can't remember where it was, but it was about 10 or 12 years ago. And it was this unbelievably sad tale. Guy is in there for raping multiple underage girls. Right. And he comes up to the parole board and the parole board's like, you're fixed. You're rehabilitated. He's like, I am not. He goes, if you let me out, I will. He begged for chemical sterilization, everything. Right. If you let me out, within a week, I will rape and kill another girl. Tells the parole board, like, no, you'll have here's your psychiatrist, in kind of the supervised release. 72 hours later, he did it.
Yeah.
Right. Let me ask you this: if we're going to talk about like the real reason is like predominantly for child pornography and things like that. Is there any other crime that a human commits in the United States that for the rest of their life, you're required to let people know where you live after you've served your time, besides child crimes? Is there?
Not that I'm aware of. No.
Right. So I'm not aware of any either. And this has always been my argument with people that want to argue about releasing these people back out in the wild, is they're not rehabilitated. It's not, hey, I robbed a bank and I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to rob another bank. Right. That it is a psychological schism that tells somebody it's okay to have sex with a kid. right? Period. Like and you've heard me say this all the time. There's very few things in my life that are absolutely black and white. That's one of them.
Yep.
Right? Don't fuck kids. Excuse my French, everybody, but there's no anybody that wants to argue me with that, I like get out of my face, right? Because you're going to get hurt, right? I'm passionately, violently passionate about that, right? But now you make a case that we're going to release these folks to the wild again, but then we say we effectively LoJack them for the rest of their life. So that in itself, your actions tell me that you don't believe. Either you're just placating people by making a law that gives a superficial answer of, hey, there's like apps like Neighborhood Watch and other things where you can boom and it'll show you where everybody that's been some low-level child looker or whatever, all the way up to full-blown, I can't believe you're out of prison.
Right.
They put them on a map. Do they do that for murderers? Right? If you commit like a low-level homicide and you spend 10 years in the clink, when you get out, does the public get to know where you live for the rest of your life?
Well, I mean, you can even break it down to something even more innocuous, but much more frequent: petty theft. Like, right. Do I have a thief that lives in my neighborhood that likes to break into cars?
Right. And, that's when you start all this stuff with data and all this stuff is how we're going to catalog it and who gets access and everything else. It comes back to the basic things. We can't agree on from a criminal standpoint, we can't agree on what rehabilitated looks like. And we can't agree that you are rehabilitated.
See, and I think we're back to something we said earlier where people don't want to get into the messy conversation. I mean, right. So like to me, when you look at something as an architecture of morality, like the 10 Commandments, right? Beautiful architecture of how things ought to be, okay?
Right.
Messing with kids isn't listed in there explicitly. Why? Because it's so well understood in the fabric of our nature, this is my argument, that you don't need to state it explicitly like murder.
Right.
Because murder, you can kind of understand like why somebody's driven to it. And that's why the law has these exemptions in some cases, like defend your castle doctrines or self-defense. Okay, so there's no circumstance under which messing with kids becomes acceptable or explainable or excusable. So it's just blatant, okay? And so then you have to get into this messy conversation of take another extreme like Dahmer, right?
Yeah.
Who went to the extreme of homicide to the point where he's cannibalizing people.
Right.
Like, I think you got to ask yourself, is that type of character redeemable in terms of society? Well, I mean, I would argue that if you're at a point of thinking, I need to LoJack this person for the rest of their life, you might also be at the point of asking that question. And the answer might be no.
You need to ask the question at that point. If we, from a legal doctrine, have said, "Hey, these people we need to know where these folks are for the rest of their lives," you've already told us we should know where they're at. It should be locked up.
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. The question is answered. This
is an overarching problem. This is what you're saying at that point is somebody with mental illness, right? Because that's really what they've got. They've got a break in the system, right, upstairs. And somebody with mental illness, you're going to remand them into the public again and let them go about their business without properly treating them.
Right.
And that's, it's the same thing with homelessness and everything else. Homelessness, we don't have a homelessness problem. We have a mental illness problem. Right? And we don't want to address that.
Nope.
Right? And that for me is really where you start saying, and some like San Francisco bums me out about it because they're putting them into certain pieces of the city. And I was about a year or so ago, I was out there and I was staying up near the Fairmont and really nice part of town. And, I was walking to a breakfast place and there's some homeless person on the street right by this nice breakfast place. Well, this box truck that looks like it used to be an ambulance pulls up, nondescript sides. The police are there and they basically put the person in there. And, I asked somebody later at the conference, I go, oh yeah, if they're outside of this little contained area, they pick them up and go put them into this contained area.
Like fucking puppies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No. And it's like, you're like, that's another effing human being.
Yeah, man.
Right. Like, well, let's get to the bottom of what goes on. Right. And nobody starts out like growing up like, I want to be homeless. Right. And at some point, when does that become, because you're looking at people that are, college graduate, well-educated people, well physically thinking, and all of a sudden, boom, they're like, I can't do anything but live on the street. Right? It's a mental illness problem, right? And we're not good at addressing that piece because that's expensive, that costs money, and there's a level of empathy and compassion that you're going to have for a very long period of time to fix it. That doesn't help people get reelected.
No,
right?
and I think if and when maybe I were in an elected position, my argument would be that's the correct application of technology. That's what I would get people in a room to try and figure out how to solve.
Right.
Use data that's available, and if you have to be intrusive with data, here's where I think it would be trustworthy to do it. Collect the data and start your predictions early, not later, and not try to like retrofit it in. Right? You like the telltale signs of psychopathy are well understood. It's not arguable, man. I mean, we understand what the signs are, and we understand where to look for them, and we have the power now to collect that data. Particularly in a user-generated Web 3.0 world, right? There's more than enough evidence if you're looking, and you have the stomach to put it together and ask those questions. Do that. If you're going to have to intrude, do it that way, because at least you're doing it forward thinking, not I'm going to arbitrarily tell a provider if they have more than 1 million users a month, you have to allow me unfettered access. Well, what?
Yeah, I know. It's I don't like all of these things, it's, you tell somebody that's got mental illnesses living at home, it's like, hey, we're going to do this. We just need to know how you think, right? We're trying to help. But again, even something like that, especially somebody that has some level of mental illness, what's the paranoia that goes along with all of the other, lower level side effects that inhibit proper treatment? How, are you going to just take the data from them? You're just going to sit there and ask questions, keep writing shit down or typing it in until you get enough, and then you go to the next person or the next person, right? How do we make this action I want to help myself, right?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then for the rest, so then that person ends up not on the streets anymore. And now we've got all this data. Where's that data warehouse so that person goes for a job and it's not held against them that they have overcome some sort of mental illness?
Right. Well,
that's the thing. It's and because the lack of empathy and compassion is blisteringly bad. Even you just take, and I run into this quite a bit when I'm talking to like executive teams, leaders of companies that are in this 50+ age group. I can't work with millennials. I said, you're not talking about millennials anymore because the oldest millennial is 39 years old and probably a director or VP in your company. Right. What you're talking about is this current group of 22 to 30-year-old professionals, right? Mm-hmm. And what is happening is, in a lot of cases, and they've gone to some of the best universities in the country, they might educationally have some skills, but intrinsically, how they behave in a group dynamic, what they expect from that, what they expect to get from that group dynamic, and what they're willing to give is sometimes skewed from an older group of people.
Yeah, sure.
Right. And it leads to lack of outcome. Right. And that's really all in a business. That's really all you gauge is what's the state of outcome. And the question is, how do you deal with these people? Right. And I'm like, these people, these are young folks. These are the next generation of Americans that are going to make this country great or not.
Right.
Right. And it's on you to help give them the benefit of your experience, positive and negative. Right. Because I believe learning what not to do is as important as knowing what to do. Right?
Yeah.
And it comes down to two things: empathy and accountability. Right. Once you hire this person, you've materially changed their life. They were on one course and they said, nope, I want to give my time and effort to you. And once somebody does that, if they don't have the requisite skill set that you thought they had, it's now on you. Mm-hmm. Because you hired him. Now, that leads to some really bad behavior because of the way that we do HR is awful. It's absolutely awful, right? If you can gerrymander the keyword system, you can most part get through the wickets, right? Because software companies have sold us on the ability to pick out better people, right? And it doesn't work that way. You get less diversity of thought, right? In my opinion, for everybody, it's like all of the easy ways we gauge diversity by how we look, where we go to the bathroom and things like that. I think you would have more diversity in the workforce if you look for diversity of thought and not the color of somebody's skin, for example, right? When I was in the Navy, I used to say, if we remove gender and names from gender references and names from the fitness reports and just said petty officer did this, chief did this, whatever rank it is, and then at the end of it promote those people, we would have a much more diverse workforce than we do now. Because any time that you say, hey, we'd like to get this percentage of the population in to be representative, you've created quotas. And in my mind, what quotas do is, if the answer is, hey, we want 10 people of this ethnic group or this social group to have this job, what happens if 11 are qualified or 12? You've given the people that don't want change the ability to say, no, we've already met the minimum standard. We don't have to do any more.
That's right.
My thing is, like, get the best and brightest in every aspect of life that you can get. And in doing so, you're going to have, that is accomplished by more diversity in thought, not more hegemony. Right? To me, is the thing. And so in removing all of those references I didn't realize this, but the Army is still, for reasons passing understanding, the last service that still uses pictures as part of the officer promotion package. Before, it was always said, well, it's to make sure that they weren't out of weight standards. Well, guess what? You can write in weight standards on a fit. You don't have to, like, the guy doesn't have to look like Adonis, but he can't be blimpy either, right? Mm-hmm. So all of those were just canaries in the mine to say, hey, we want to keep a certain look to what we're doing, and I say that in the worst possible way that you can imagine.
Yeah.
And HR it's an unintentional consequence of this is, hey, we're trying to use technology to make this process more efficient, right? They're not trying to make it better. They're trying to make it more efficient. And I talk to people all the time, and they'll bring in 3 or 4 people and they'll hire them, and one of them works out, right? Because the other 3 were really good at understanding what keywords and how to manipulate their cover letter to move on to the next thing and move on to the next wicket. And unless you're a lawyer, doctor, or something where you have to be credentialed to practice that, why are you saying you require a college degree, right? Yeah. Because it's easy to separate and say, well, that person should have some minimum knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's driving a lot of the problem when you get young people in now. My thing would, and I tell people, this is how I would approach it as a leader. You're going to have empathy with the person to go, look, okay, we understand that you don't have the requisite skill set that we require, whatever that might be. It might be socially, it might be educationally, whatever that might be. We're going to put every tool in front of you and every person in front of you to help you achieve this goal and make you better. Mm-hmm. But here's the thing. We still require an outcome. Mm-hmm. This is called being an adult. Right, it's on me because we thought you were qualified and you actually didn't meet what we needed. So we're going to train you. We're going to make sure that you're competent. Number one, you're dragging somebody into your tribe and you're saying, hey, learn from us, be part of us. We want you to be great, which is a very positive, uplifting thing. And then you're saying, once we give you this knowledge, we need the outcome. Right? Yeah. The adult world. This is why you call it work, not vacation, because we show up and we pay you. Right. And the quid pro quo for that is I need an outcome. That's how you do it equitably and sensibly and humanely. Mm-hmm. The rest of it is I can't help you. Right. And nobody wants to be a failure. Right. No. Nobody. And I don't care what tribe they're in. Now, do you want to be in that tribe? That's a different discussion. Right? Am I comfortable in this environment? That's a wholly different discussion. Yeah. But for the most part, you're now saying, hey, somebody's extended their hand to me. They've pulled me up. They've helped me out when I was at my worst. What are you getting from that person from that day on? Right? Because you're not being judgmental about it. You're saying, hey, I get it. Everybody doesn't know everything. That's why we try to hire the most diverse workforce we can hire. Exactly. I want to learn from you. Right. And it's like when I was at Silent Circle, I used to walk around and ask people what they were doing to be great today. Mm-hmm. And it didn't, like, at first it was like they thought I was talking about work. I was talking about, as a human on this planet, large or small, what are you doing to be better tomorrow than you were yesterday? Because if you're doing that, you're going to help us out in the long run. Mm-hmm. Right? Because you're going to have a better sense of self. You're going to be more engaged in what goes on. I knew I had it down when one of the youngest folks we had working there walked into my office and she looked at me and she's like, TK, what are you doing to be great today? That's true accountability. Yeah. But yeah. Most leaders don't want to be held accountable for for the same thing they hold other people accountable for, because it's hard. Because you have to put yourself out there and say, yes, I'm in charge, but I don't know everything.
Well, you have to be willing to be seen as being human fallible, too.
Right, as being fallible, right? And I think the quicker we embrace that as humans, all this other stuff we're talking about encryption and everything else, not. But no, everybody's pushing themselves into their own corner, and they want to defend their corner of the world. Right. And that's the damaging part to me.
Well said.
And on that note.
Yeah, man. Wow, that was perfect, dude. Perfect. And we did it. We talked about exactly what we wanted to talk about. We went pretty nuanced and deep. You know, I that's why I value these long form discussions. You can actually work out some thoughts.
But I think that's everything in life, right? You can't, like, there's no yes and no answer in life. Most of life is nuanced, right? There was a great line in a movie, and it was somebody that was praying the president of the United States, and he goes, I've been the president of the United States for the last 4 years, and very rarely are things black and white. And usually on days when they're black and white, there's a body count associated with it.
Yeah.
Hurricane, hide, run, right? Tornado, right? Somebody's got a gun and they're firing a lot of rounds, get out of there, right? And so it becomes a very black and white thing. Everything else has nuance, and nuance bothers people. It especially bothers politicians, right? And because of the system that we've allowed, right? I'm not
totally.
Blaming them is like blaming a compass for pointing north, right? I mean, you're saying, hey, this is how we tend to vote as a species. You know, as Americans, we vote this way, and so your actions need to be in this little box,
right?
And we get what we ask for. And most of life, you get what you ask for, whether you realize it or not.
Exactly. We know, as despicable as some of the things are in politics, for me, it's the system. It's not the people. Right.
If you don't like the two candidates we have running for president, that's not them. That has nothing to do with them. We have a filtering mechanism that doesn't get us Reagans. It doesn't get us Kennedys anymore.
Right.
It gets us a game show host and another contestant. Right. And, you know, I mean, it makes me want to put my head down. It makes me want to spin my chair around for good. Right. No, just stop. I'm like, no, I can't talk. Like, you're going to hurt my feelings. So, yeah, no, it was good. This was fun.
Right on, man. Well, I think we'll do it again next week. I'll find something for us to talk about. I think Dan will be back. So
very cool.
We'll see how far we can get.
All right, everybody. Have a great week.
You too. Take care. Bye, everybody.